Coming up on iOS today, it is time to talk about iOS 18 because it's here and you may have downloaded it, but you may be wondering what in the world you can do with it. So that's what we're going to talk about next on iOS Today.
Podcasts you love
from people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is iOS Today with special guest Dan Moren and me, Mikah Sargent. Episode 721, recorded Tuesday, September 17th, 2024, for Thursday, September 26th, 2024. What's new in iOS 18 and what's yet to come? Hello and welcome to iOS Today, the show where we talk all things iOS, iPad OS, Vision OS, Watch OS, HomePod OS, etc., 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 etc. Actually, today we're going to be talking a lot about iOS, but there are other platforms. And of course, you have those devices like your iPhone, your Apple Watch that run this software. On this show, we help you make the most of those devices by giving you tips, tricks, advice, apps, etc. Worth checking out. I am one of your hosts, Mikah Sargent, and I am joined again today by my special guest co-host, Dan Moren of Six Colors fame, of Clockwise fame, of sci-fi fame. Hello, Dan.
Hello, Mikah. It is good to be here talking about iOS. I recently discovered that I started writing reviews of iOS when it was iPhone software 2.0 back in 2008. So
moly.
I'm old.
You've been around a while.
I've been around.
So this is a very exciting time where new software is finally available to the masses. It tends to be a little bit less exciting for those of us in the Apple tech journalism space because we have in many cases been using this software or we have been talking about this software. But I always find this time of year exciting because I finally get to use the new features with my friends and family that require them being on. And so, I've got the couple of people, you and Rosemary Orchard, for example, who I can interact with in certain ways that we'll talk about. But then I go to do those interactions with other people and I'm realizing, I can't do that yet. So it's really nice to have in theory, everyone within about a month on the same OS, all together having fun with the new stuff. But this is a unique time because we have more than just one or two small features that are not available on day one in the new version of iOS. There are always some features that get announced that take time to roll out, but given the unique couple of years that we've had with artificial intelligence and particularly generative AI, things are interesting at Apple in terms of what's announced and what's actually
delicately put.
Yeah, thank you. What's announced and what's actually available. And I think the most troubling part of it for me is how everything seems to be front-loaded with all these features that aren't available for people to use. I just downloaded the iOS 18, all the new features PDF, because that's finally available to use. And
the first 3 or 4 pages of that are all things that are not available. And you will not know that until you reach the bottom of those pages. And there's a little note being like, these things come later.
So I think it's probably best if we talk about what actually is available. Yeah. Apple does have a great little guide that kind of talks about the key features that have been introduced. And it starts with different means of customizing your device. You can now place apps and widgets anywhere you want on the screen. So that means that you can skip spaces on your device. You don't have to fill in every little area. which is quite nice. And you are able to also kind of change the colors of the apps. I'm curious, have you played around with tinted icons and the new kind of dark icons? We're waiting, of course, for developers to update their apps to really make those look good, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few asterisks here. One, I am always careful to qualify that it's anywhere on the screen, as long as it's still in the grid, because the grid still exists. You can't just like pile icons here and there like files on your Mac's desktop. You know, they have to still snap to that grid. But as you said, you can leave empty spaces. I will also say that I've had much better experience leaving those empty spaces when I'm designing a home screen from the ground up, as opposed to trying to rearrange an existing home screen that is full of apps already and widgets, because stuff still moves around to like kind of try to snap to grid, and it can be kind of disorienting if you have a screen full of stuff and you're trying to get that perfect positioning. So I always recommend maybe just start with a new home screen and build your home screen up from blank if you really want to customize where stuff is. I've played around with all the icons and designs and stuff like that. Dark mode is pretty good, and I will add that despite waiting for the developers to update their apps to support it, Apple's actually gone ahead and basically tried to figure out ways to do that itself. So it will, even if you have apps that don't have their own dark mode icon, you might not know, because Apple will sort of flip them into a dark mode regardless, based on analyzing the icon and trying to make it look the way they think they should make it look. Now, that also means that the icon, you know, that those things might look a little weird because it's Apple deciding programmatically how to do it and not the developer deciding what they think looks good. The tinting color thing. I've seen very few. Good. It could be, but I see very few instances of it being good. This is my experience. I'm not a particularly color sensitive person. Like I'm not very good at color. I usually default to my wife's opinions on color and things. Not because I'm colorblind or anything like that. I don't have a good sense for what looks good together. And so I've played around with it a bunch, and I think they've refined it a little bit in terms of making sure that you don't have icons that look too garish. But in the end, it's still, I don't think it's designed to work that way. Like, I see why some people might want it, but I feel like more often than not, the best I can say about it is that there are some icons that look pretty good in a tinted mode. And I think it's ones where they have very simple icons. So like messages, right? It's got a green bubble on a background, or a green or a white bubble on a green background, or whatever. But like, you can kind of make that work with a variety of different colors. But then you get into something complicated like photos, where the whole point is it's got a bunch of different colors in it. And simplifying that down to a single color, I think doesn't look as good. So there are definitely cases where it's like, I wish you could be a little more selective about how your icons looked, which I know you can if developers support it, but I kind of wish there was like a per icon mode. I also understand why Apple doesn't want to do that, because that could lead to some also truly hideous looking home screens. But more than anything, I think I'm a fan of the automatic mode where it switches back and forth between light and dark depending on time of day. For me, that I think is a good look, and it definitely is a good visual cue for sort of reminding myself, like, it's daytime, I'm working, or it's nighttime, and things are a little more relaxed. Night phone, but one phone.
Yay, one phone that does the day and the night phone. I am also with you in terms of and pretty much everything that you've said. I have not really liked the way that the tinted icons end up looking. Again, it could be good, and I do think that it gets better when you have the developer involved. But yes, for some apps, the way that the Photos app looks, not great. I love the ability to make the icons just a little bit bigger by just ditching the text. I think that's great. Yeah. I know what the icons mean at this point, and most of the time I use Spotlight to actually launch my app, so it's kind of nice to have that as well. We should keep on keeping on. The next big change is Control Center, which has gotten a complete redesign. I find it overwhelming. Control Center has been kind of regrouped into multiple categories. And so up to this point, you've swiped down from the top right corner of the screen to access Control Center. Now, if you keep swiping while you have Control Center activated, so let me try this again. swipe down from the top right corner of the screen, but keep your thumb or your finger there. If you keep swiping, you can go to the different pages of Control Center. There's kind of an extras page. There's your music page or other media. There's your home page, which by that I mean home as in controlling your home. And then there's all of your connectivity. So now there are multiple Control Center panes, and they can be adjusted. You can add controls. You can take controls away. You can change the size of controls, which is great. But I'm curious, Dan, what's been your experience in using this new Control Center and how you feel about this new way of doing things?
So on the face of it, I am in favor of this. I'm in favor of anything that lets people customize phones more to their liking. So like sort of generically speaking, I think it's a good feature. In practice, and for me personally, I have not found it to be as useful as I hoped. And in large part, that's my fault. I think it's because I have a lot of muscle memory after years and years and years of Control Center, of knowing where things are. And the idea of reorganizing stuff to make it more convenient is a little harder for me to wrap my head around, because it's like, well, I know where those buttons are by feel. Now I have to spend however many days getting used to where I've moved buttons. And a lot of times I think Apple did a good job of its sort of default Control Center layout of a lot of the most popular controls, things like airplane mode and Wi-Fi and music controls and volume and brightness controls all being kind of located very prominently. And so it means that, yes, you can put a lot of extra stuff in there, and I think that's great, but I have a hard time finding stuff that is as useful as the stuff that's already in there. So I have definitely used it a bit. I'm the one sort of wild card that I'm kind of interested in seeing is how third-party developers take advantage of it, because they will have the opportunity to design stuff that can be used in Control Center as well. I don't know how that will end up playing out for me, but I'm kind of intrigued to see how it works. And I will note one thing that I really do like about this is the ability to have a specific smart home widget for one device. Because previously, Apple had this like smorgasbord where it's like, let's kind of guess which devices we think you're going to want access to. And invariably, there'd be something you're like, it's not there. So now, for example, I have a dedicated control for my bedside light in Control Center, so that I always know where it is and I always can go there and it's always there. So there are some pluses for sure. I think some of it just runs up against all those years of muscle memory and what we're all used to.
Yeah, I agree with you. Maybe it's just going to take some time to redo it for sure, or to rethink it. Another big change I think that people are going to be a little bit concerned about is the redesign of Photos. As Apple itself says, this is the biggest ever design update for Photos. They call it, of course, gorgeous, easy to use, customizable. It's that customizable aspect where, again, yes, we love more control. Yes, give us more control. Great. But I've got enough decisions to make in my life day to day, and I just kind of liked not having to make decisions here. And I really feel like I've had to go in and adjust things so that they're where I want them. And I'm curious about your experience with the new Photos tool and maybe your thoughts on getting rid of the weird carousel.
Well, okay, so a couple things. One, I actually think getting rid of the carousel was a great idea. I think that added unnecessary complexity and the benefits were extremely unclear. There were very few things that I would want to have in there, and the idea that you could swipe both up and down and left and right in the interface, I think was too confusing and too much for most people. I'm actually pretty happy with where they've landed. I think they've done a nice job of compromising between a very utilitarian thing, which is getting access to all of your photos in that classic grid, as well as being able to more prominently surface the kind of things where you might want to see photos. I like the customization here a lot more, because since it's not a place where you're as used to having a specific layout, everything has changed already. So you kind of have a fresh new canvas to decide what you want where, and not having these specifications of like, oh, you need to have these featured photos at the top. is good because it means you can put whatever up there you want. So, for example, on mine, I've played around with a couple different UIs, but at the top for me, I have the pinned collection setting because that is basically like your own ability to do, hey, what collections of things, what albums or what various things would I like up there? And so right at the first thing I have is we have a shared album for pictures of my kid that we share with our parents and some other family members. And that's always at the top now. And I go into that a lot, so it's handy. I have my favorites. I have the people detection of me, my wife, and my son. And so I have all those things very easy to get to. And then I have some of the other things like recent days, which is a new collection they've added. So you can quickly jump to okay, where are the pictures I took today or yesterday? And then, various other things. And I really do like being able to have control over that. And I think that, sort of the thing I wrote in my iOS review over on 6 Colors was saying, I'm not Smog trying to collect all my photos and sit atop them forever and just never use them for anything, right? The whole point is I have decades and tens of thousands of photos, and I want to see them. I want opportunities to look at them and not simply be like, well, I need to find this thing from, 2012. Let me just scroll back through a grid of photos for 10 years. No, I think surfacing pictures for people to look at and trying to do that in an intelligent way is great. And then on top of that, adding the ability for people to select, hey, do I want specifically the things I want to see, or do I want the, photos to suggest things to me see? I think that's great. So it'll take some getting used to because it's definitely different. But going from a scenario where everybody had the same interface and maybe it worked for some people, but for other people, it was just not helpful, to something where it is, a little more pleasing to more of the people and they have more choice and control over it, I think is a win.
Yeah. You know what? Again, that idea of maybe I'm just being kind of an old man about not wanting the changes to be there.
Open up. It's good. Change can be good, Mikah. I'm the last person who will ever tell you this, probably.
Except today. So this next one is one that I was kind of hinting at earlier. I'm really excited about some changes in messages, including text formatting. Now people don't have to send those horrible what they call alternate fonts, where what they're essentially doing is using Unicode characters to try and make something look bold or underlined or have a strike through or italicized. Those wreak havoc on systems that read what's on the screen, and they're not accessibility minded. And so just having simple text formatting where somebody doesn't have to do all that stuff to be able to bold something, I think is really cool. As well as the ability to send later, which I'm very happy about. That means that I can compose a message and I can schedule it to be delivered in the future. What's great is that even if your phone is off, that message will still send. If you're out of service, that message will still send, as long as when you sent it, you were in service, because it basically kind of gets held in the cloud somewhere and ready to send off to where it needs to whenever it's time. And also, it doesn't tell the person. That was a question that I got a lot. Does the person on the other end see that I sent a scheduled message? No, it just looks like a normal message. As well as text effects, like making the text kind of jump and move around. And I think what you and I are both happy about, which is that every emoji can now be a tap back. What is a tap back? If folks maybe don't know the term.
Tapback is, you've probably seen it before, where a little bubble pops up on your text bubble with either a heart or a thumbs up or a thumbs down or something like that. It was used to be very limited just to those 5 or 6 options, but now, yes, you can do any emoji in the vast emoji palette, and it's great. It's great. It just makes me really happy. And I'm glad, as to your point up top, Mikah, I've been sending these with people like you and other folks we know that are on the beta. And then every time I go to send one of those to my wife or my mom or somebody, I'm like, oh, they're just going to see a silly placeholder message until they update. So I just won't. And now I am looking forward to having that ability to all of the people I know.
Yes, indeed. Me too. I'm going to skip over mail. It's not super.
There's nothing really there.
Super exciting.
Now.
Right, exactly. Safari also is going to take some time to get everything, but there are some kind of summarizing features that I've talked about in the past. tell us about the Passwords app, because you are a Passwords user.
I am.
Tell me about what's new there and if you're enjoying how things are going.
Yeah, so Passwords was previously a system setting preference pane, depending on whether you're on the Mac or iOS. It is now a standalone app. I think this is generally good. If you're somebody who's been using this, you won't notice a huge difference. The main difference is it's in an app now rather than a preference pane, which makes it a little more accessible. If you're not somebody who's used this is essentially Apple's password management system. It works seamlessly across all of your Apple's devices and also in other devices like Windows. And it lets you access and autofill all your passwords, your two-factor codes, and all that jazz. Like I said, the biggest thing that's sort of different with it is that it is a standalone app, and that opens up some possibilities. So, for example, when you go in and look at all your list of passwords, you can now sort all your passwords, for example, which can be really handy if it's like, I need to find that password I just created. You can sort by recency. You can also, it has built-in categories. It looks a little bit like the Reminders app. So, for example, you can quickly get to all your Wi-Fi passwords or all your passkeys. So all of that is very, very convenient. The Wi-Fi passwords are also in there for the first time, I believe, as opposed to previously being stored somewhere else in the system. So it's once again bringing that under its roof as well. Beyond that, though, I think most people, like me, probably mostly interact with passwords via autofill in Safari and other places. And that really hasn't changed here. My biggest hope is that this means that having passwords as its own thing will encourage development of that in the future, and they'll keep adding features to it. So we'll have to wait and see what next year might bring on that regard. But I will add that there is the ability, if you use a different password manager, you can import your passwords into the Passwords app. So that is one thing that if you were thinking, hey, I might make the jump from 1Password or something like that, it's now easier to import all of your 1Password data into the Passwords app.
Outside of Passwords, I was really excited to see Maps get hiking and walking updates with also topographic maps. I have used the very expensive All Trails in the past, and it's just so pricey. And so having a lot of that built right in is really great to have it there and be able to kind of track my hikes and also understand what the routes are and even create my own routes as well. Wallet has gotten some updates, including kind of an update to the event tickets platform. So now you can see more about the venue and kind of figure out what parking is like, that kind of thing, if the event venue supports it. Installment payments, which are for some people kind of a taboo topic, but they are available. And then I thought it was kind of interesting that Apple Pay has come to Chrome and also just to the Windows PC in general. So now you can use that as a payment system, even if you don't have a Mac or an iPhone as your, well, I should say, even if you don't have a Mac or some other device that is a little bit more tied in with Apple.
Yeah, I haven't really got a chance to try any of that out, but I'm intrigued to see how it shakes out.
In AirPods territory, some new interactions, including, and I've tested these out because especially with the election around the corner, getting lots of calls. And so being able to just shake my head no as another call comes in and another call comes in has been quite nice.
I will say it's really nice also for just standalone things. I have the prompt every once in a while when I'm out for a walk, and it tells you like, hey, we notice you've been walking. Do you want to start a workout? And you can nod your head yes for that, which I like. So it's kind of like the default button essentially in a lot of interactions. Where
that's
if it
really
prompts you to do
nice.
something, you can just yes, no, or cancel for no, which is great. I think that's a real winner.
Oh, and then there's also one more feature in AirPods. Well, there are a couple more features, but one other feature that we forgot to mention, which is voice isolation. And so I think that it's much improved. So whenever you're on a call, whenever you were just using your phone before, it would do voice isolation. Now it will do voice isolation with the AirPods in. So that should help kind of narrow in the voice and make it possible to hear what's going on. In a few other things, Notes is getting audio recording, which is really exciting. You'll be able to, right within the Notes app, be able to do an audio recording and get a transcription. If you are placing a phone call, there's also going to be transcribing for that coming, where you can have both the text and the audio of the phone call that can get saved into Notes. And then I've been using the Math Notes features, which is really fun. I've had a lot of fun with that, and it also involves being able to kind of write things out and then change it on the fly as you want to, which is pretty exciting stuff. Outside of that, I want to mention probably that Apple TV has gotten a feature that it brings it in line with Amazon's X-ray feature, where if you're watching a show, you can kind of pause and see information about the people who are on screen, also music that's playing in the background, which I know a lot of people like. And enhanced dialogue has existed with HomePods, but that has improved in Apple TV all around, and is also, they have built in a feature now where if you rewind content, or when you mute the audio, it just goes ahead and turns on subtitles, which I think is quite delightful. I was curious though, Dan, I'll mention one other thing that I just remembered. And that is a feature that I really thought was cool, but is not available to me now in Oregon, but was available to me in California. Electricity usage and rates. So Pacific Gas and Electric customers are able to connect their utility account to the Home app, and then they can actually see their full-on electricity usage and their rate plan right in the Home app. Hopefully that's going to be expanding to more rather than just being PG&E, because I think that's a really cool feature that could be very beneficial for folks, and tying in automations for, hey, especially around like the holidays, if you celebrate Halloween and you just put up a bunch of lights and a bunch of moving stuff, and then you see a spike in your electricity, maybe after a certain period of time you could have those lights turn off or whatever. I think that's a cool idea. Anything else that you think bears mentioning that is available in iOS 18 right now before we wrap up by talking about the features that you won't get on day one?
A couple quick ones. One feature I really like is that you can, when the home screen or lock screen customization, there is now an option to make your clock like a rainbow rather than just being a single color or white. That's kind of snuck in there. I kind of enjoy that. I will say the privacy preference pane, not a very exciting thing, but it's gotten reworked that makes it a lot easier to see how many apps are accessing various things like your calendars or your contacts, etc. That's kind of fun in terms of just being able to keep on top of that. And then a feature that I really like that I got to try out last week, which is previously you've been able to do a screen sharing session via FaceTime or messages with somebody. And as of iOS 18, they added a feature where you can draw on the other person's screen. So if you're helping somebody, like, tap this icon, you can circle it and you see a little circle appear on the screen, and then it like dissolves into a little flash. And you can, for the first time, do remote control of another iOS device. So if you're trying, again, to help somebody else do some text, let me show you how to do this. You can request control of their device and then actually just use it remotely. That's awesome. I think it's going to be super helpful. Obviously it comes with some concerns, and it does warn you and make sure you're not like giving access to random people. But like, I know when I talk to like my mom and I'm helping her with something, it is handy sometimes to just be able to do like, let me show you, here are the steps.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that that's quite nice to have and not have to, do that dance without it. So last but not least, Apple Intelligence was touted on stage at the iPhone event and a WWDC before that. Apple Intelligence, the first features are set to arrive in October, but all of the features are not set to arrive until later this year or in the coming months. So with Apple Intelligence, we've talked before on the show about the writing tools, the ability to kind of change the text that you have, so you can highlight something and say, I want to change the tone of that. I want to create multiple versions that I can kind of choose between. Proofreading options that go past just built-in basic grammar and spell check. So it will actually do grammar fixes, language refinements, describe. So this lets you describe a change that you want. So if you say, okay, let me highlight this message I'm about to send to Dan. Can you please make this a formal letter that is a poem? And then it can change it based on what I've described if I'm trying to be difficult.
I expect all of your messages to come this way in the future.
From now on. Also, the ability to summarize, and this is kind of across the board, not just summarizing your own text, but summarizing articles, summarizing all sorts of stuff. And then composing, where this is a feature that'll probably come later with ChatGPT integration, where you can actually just create content from scratch. So of note, Apple is not itself doing compose features, but instead is sort of farming that out to a third party like ChatGPT or another option. Now, I also saw Apple is already doing advertisements for a smarter Siri. And those ads are already out there. What is coming in Siri that is not going to be available yet, but is already being advertised?
So many things, Mikah. Yes, Apple has showed off a bunch of Siri features that kind of bring the Siri we'd always hope for, which include things like this ability to understand personal context, where if you are like, oh, hey, I was texting with Mikah and he recommended a book. Can you tell me what it was? Right? Like those things where you can sort of compose these natural language queries, and rather than like, having to be very specific about it or have information that you just could not capture, it will be able to do that. Or if you're saying like, hey, I'm filling out this form, put my birthday in here. Like it knows what your birthday is. It knows where you're talking about in the form. Also, the ability to see things on the screen and react to them. Like if you're looking at a movie and you're like, hey, how are the reviews of this? It just knows you're looking at a movie and it can give you that information. In-app actions, which are basically like the ability to actually do things that developers have specified as actions you can trigger via Siri. So, for example, if you're looking at an app that tracks your streaks and you're like, yeah, mark that streak completed. It could do that. So there's all sorts of these really powerful features that I think the reason we're not getting them immediately is because they're very hard and they're very powerful. And we've all been waiting a long time for Siri to truly feel like an assistant. This seems to promise that, but we're going to have to wait several months before we see exactly how well it works.
Absolutely. There's really honestly quite a bit in terms of what Apple eventually will announce, including will come out with Image Playground, the app, and the sort of creation mechanism to create little characters or create a version of your friend, or use images that have text. So you can say, I want you to create a more specific image. So, it creates for you something with a moon in the background, and you can say, make the moon a crescent moon. Making changes there, seeing the history of how you have changed it. All of that is set to come in Notes, Pages, Numbers, Keynote, Freeform, and also in Messages. Those are not day one features. Those will come later. There's also an update to it's a special focus mode that will kind of look at your behavior and look at the notifications that are coming in to try and figure out what you most pay attention to and what needs to be paid attention to, and then we'll provide interruptions when they need to, or just silence things when they don't. I have too much of a control issue to ever be able to use this feature, I think, comfortably. And I have found that the summarization of notifications is also troublesome. I have not... I've ended up missing things because a notification was summarized. So you can turn it off piecemeal for different things, and I have it off for most things because I just did not like what I was missing by having it summarize things for me. But again, this is all in beta, so it's not the final version, and that's something to kind of keep in mind.
Yeah, tons of stuff still to come, and it's going to be a roller coaster for the next year.
Absolutely. So we will, of course, keep our eye out for as those features ship, because again, those are not day one features. We'll see the first round of those in October, and we'll see how long it takes for Apple to roll out the media creation tools, which they seem to kind of be holding on to get just right. And again, there's a lot to go through, even without getting into the Apple Intelligence stuff. So be sure to play around and let us know if you have questions about any of the features, because we will, of course, be covering them as we continue on. That is going to bring us to the end of this episode of iOS Today. We appreciate you for tuning in today. You can, of course, join the club at twit.tv/clubtwit if you would like to gain access to the video version of this show, iOS Today. It's just $7 a month, and by joining the club, not only do you gain access to the video version of every single Club Twitch show, you also get every single Twitch show ad-free, just the content, none of the ads, special for you. You gain access to the Twit Plus bonus feed. That's a special feed that has extra content you won't find anywhere else, behind the scenes, before the show, after the show. Special Club Twit events get published there, and access to the members-only Discord server, a fun place to go to chat with your fellow Club Twit members and those of us here at Twit. We'd love to see you in the club. Again, just $7 a month, and we appreciate those of you who have joined the club for your support. Dan Moren, if folks want to follow you online to keep up with what you're doing, where do they go to do that?
Well, you can read all my coverage of things like iOS 18 over at sixcolors.com. You can hear me podcast over on relay.fm with Clockwise with Mikah, or on The Rebound, which you can find in your podcast listener of choice. You can find all links to that, as well as my science fiction novels, a new one of which is out now, probably, as you're listening to this. You can find all that information at dmoren.com, and I'm on most social media as @dmoren.
Awesome. If you're looking for me online, you can find me at Mikah Sargent on many a social media network, or head to chihuahua.coffee. That's CHIHUA.coffee, where I've got links to the places I'm most active online. Thank you for tuning in today, and I'll catch you again next week for another episode of iOS Today. Bye-bye.
Bye.